So my talk is basically about AI and some of the AI research I've been doing here with project management and trying to figure out how we can increase project success. So what I plan to talk about, a little bit of an intro, talk about AI, and I have two demos to do for you. These are concepts. You can people call them use cases. They're basically examples of concepts that I'm working on to develop machine learning and natural language processing in terms of using it in a practical setting for projects. So first thing, for those who aren't too aware of this, I use this in a lot of presentations where people aren't familiar with AI at all. AI is normally coded in a program like R or Python. I do my programming in Python. Key capabilities are classification and prediction. And the logic is based, as you should be aware, on statistics and calculus. It's equations. Equations are used in these machine learning tools. The learning is either supervised, unsupervised, or reinforcement. And the supervised learning is done with labels. The data sets are labeled. That will be my first example. I'll show you an example of that. Unsupervised learning is where you have enough information. So for example, if I was to tell you, I'm thinking of an object. It has branches, it has leaves, it has a trunk, and it has roots. What's the object? And you're going to say, oh, it's a tree. But I didn't tell you it was a tree. So unsupervised learning, it's not labeled, but you can infer what it is based on the data you receive. And reinforcement, the example I use for reinforcement is with your smartphone, if anybody has a smartphone, and you go to type in a word, specifically if you type in a word that it's not familiar with. So my company, I have a company that I used to do my research with as well. My company name is Stone Meadow Consulting. So I'll go to type in the word Stone Meadow. Well, it's not a normal word. So the first time I start typing stone, and it comes up with those little suggestions there, like stone mason, stone whatever. And then, I said, no, it's Stone Meadow. Then I go, the second time I go to type it in, same thing happens. But interestingly enough, the third time I go to type the word in, it's learned that that's the word that I want. So it recommends Stone Meadow. So that's reinforcement learning through basically trial and error. So what is AI? There's something that I call the Hollywood myth. And we see this on TV shows and movies where, AI becomes sentient somehow and takes over the world or becomes alive and does things. There was a series in the UK I watched called Humans with a Z on the end. It's quite interesting. Once again, how robots become alive. It's not really true. What happens is AI is based on equations, and equations don't become alive. I read a book from one of the first developers of neural networks, Yann LeCun, and they asked him, they said, Yann, do you think in the future that somehow, AI will become alive and take over the world? And his response was priceless. He said, taking over the world is not based on intelligence. It's based on testosterone. So I always liked that expression. Why aren't you laughing? Okay, I want to talk a little bit about project success rates. I want to get to the demos, so I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail. But really from my talking to project managers and listening to project managers around the world, our project success rates are generally about 50% if we're lucky. That is delivering the project scope on time and on or under budget, really about 50% of the time if we're lucky. And what does that mean? Could you imagine? Can you imagine going to a pharmacy or a drugstore with a prescription and 50% of the time you get the right medication? Like, what's wrong with us? Why haven't we changed our methodology? Why do we accept this? Why do we accept such poor performance? And now we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity, I believe, through AI technology to dramatically increase project success rates and reduce waste. And one of the other things, there's this book called Project Revolution. And one of the surveys that come out of there was that 75% of project managers admitted that at the beginning of the project, they knew it was going to fail. 75% before the project started. They said, yeah, it's going to fail. And sure enough, it did fail. So I thought about this. Actually, the tool started creating the tool before that survey came out. So what I've created is called a predictor tool. Its official title is Project Success Prediction, whatever. It's based on machine learning. It's a 3-layer neural network that I created in Python. It uses a supervised learning process, which means the data is labeled. Data sets are labeled. And I've hosted it in the cloud on a cloud application called Heroku. It's similar to Amazon Web Services, if anybody's familiar with that, except it's cheaper because I have no money, right? I input data from an Excel spreadsheet or Excel spreadsheets, once again, just because it's simple and it's easy to do it that way. And the format for a neural network is there's an input layer, which is your data sets, your labeled data sets. There's this hidden layer, which is the neural network that goes through and makes the correlations between all the data. And then it comes out with a probability factor. What is the probability of success for a new project? So the way I set it up is I collected data from a number of completed projects. And then based on those projects, I looked at the project documentation before the projects began. And I captured 87 factors. In machine learning, these are known as features. 87 factors. Did the project have a requirements traceability document? Did the project have a identified risk owner? Whatever, I have 87 factors that I identified. And I captured it for each project. So each data set is labeled. And the label is a success or a failure. Based on the documentation before the project began, and knowing now that this project is completed, was the project a success or failure? So training data is loaded and validated, a model is created. And then what I do is based on the model that's created, based on all those correlations for what makes a success in a project, I load a new model. I load a new project, new set of data. And then based on that model, it will predict a success or failure before that project begins. So I think I'm going to do a demo now, and let me get this up. Stop sharing this one. Okay, can people see my screen? Yes. Okay, this is my predictor tool. See the camera out of the way, I gotta log in. So I go to this tool, I log in. This is available, by the way, if anybody wants to use it to play with. I don't charge money for this. I'm just trying to use it to help people understand concepts. So it's an AI-based prediction tool because I'm using a neural network. It is a 3-layer neural network, which is a correct prediction in this little graph I have. So the first thing I want to do is train the neural network, train with the data sets. So I'm going to pull up an Excel spreadsheet that I have with the data. And now I have my data loaded. You can see down in the first column, the project. These are a list of projects that I've captured the data for. And then there are features across the first row. And there's a number of items that are defined. They're defined in more detail in a different document, but is there a scope statement? Was there a WBS? That kind of thing. So I've uploaded this data, and now I want to do is train the model. And the way I set this up with my computer engineering team is, I think I only have 40 or 50 projects, but what they do is they randomly pull out a number of projects to do the validation on. And what I mean by that is it's okay to have a model that has correlations, but you want to know how accurate those correlations are. In a typical machine learning model, what you would do is put all the data in, correlate all the data, and then put a couple of sample projects in where you already knew the result. And you would use that to validate it. For my purposes, what I do is it pulls it out randomly and will give me a result. So in this case, we can see it's pulled out a number of projects. So I've trained the model. So the model's now trained and it says 90% match. So 9 times out of 10, it will give me an accurate result. Okay. This is like a political poll. For those of you who are used to that, they say, oh, 9 times out of 10, this poll is accurate to within 5 percentage points or whatever. This is statistics. So now that I have the model, I'm going to name it. I'm going to call it Paul's Model 1. I'm going to as a demo, and I will save the model. All right, so now I've got the model saved, and I'm going to go into the prediction side. And here's where I'm going to make the prediction. I have two projects, Ashley, that I have data for, and these projects are not labeled. These are brand new projects that haven't started yet. And so I want to make a prediction based on my model. I upload them, upload, open. There we go. So I have these two projects. You can see them here, Project A and Project B. And I'm going to, if I can find out where I'm just having trouble with this bar on the right-hand side, zoom bar, there we go. And I'm going to perform a prediction on these. So it says, okay, my first Project A says, based on your project documentation, you have a 99.9% probability of success. Great. And Project B has a 63% probability of success. So how would you use this? How would you use this in project management? And I would suggest, if you're an organization that has something like a project screening or selection process, then perhaps this is one of the criteria that you can use. So perhaps you have something like financial, ROI, strategic alignment to the organization. And then maybe you include probability of success as one of the criteria. Because I don't want to implement a project that's not going to be successful. I'd like to implement a project that, based on the data for our organization, it looks like that project will be successful. Now, what do you do with Project B here? 63% probability of success. And what I do is I would take my project team and I'd say, project team, come back, come with me and listen, whatever we've done, the strategy for implementing this project. I know we have to implement the project, even though it's got 63% probability. Maybe we have to implement it for regulatory or legal reasons. So we get the project team together and rework the strategy for implementing that project to try and bring it up so that it's more successful. Okay? So that's, and I know people are going to say to me, if you're not already thinking this question, I'll ask questions in a short while just after this quick demo. People are going to say, well, Paul, does the AI tool tell you what you need to do to bring that probability up? And my answer is, I haven't explained it properly. What I've given you is the concept of the neural network performing a probability on project data. Now, what if I was to say, here's the real tool. The real tool, I have 200,000 features, and I have 10,000 projects, and I do a correlation on it. Now a probability comes up and says, okay, 63%. Well, I've got 200,000 features in here. The neural network is not really designed to say, okay, here are the 40,000 features you need to change in order to be more successful. That's not really the way it's designed. Those kinds of tools are coming along in other areas outside of project management, but they're not really developed yet. The complexity is so huge. And besides, is that really what you want to do? You want to go into the project documentation and just change a few numbers to make the probability higher? That's not really the way it should work. You need to have a good strategy for implementing your project. And if you've defined it properly, you should have a good probability of success. Now, the second part of this is this is before the project begins. So part 2 is going to be as the project is being executed. And I've defined the metrics for a project being executed. So those metrics I have right now in an Excel spreadsheet. I don't know how many I've defined, but I'm working on that model as well. And the way I explain this is, let's pretend you're in a project video game and you walk down a corridor and there's a door to your right. And you put your hand on the doorknob and you go to open that door, but first run the prediction tool. And the prediction tool says, you have a 44% probability of success. Okay, don't go there, stop. Close that door, walk down the corridor, 3 doors to the left, put your hand on that doorknob. You go to open the door, run the predictor tool. It says you now have a 99% probability of success. So what's happening here? We now have a tool that is helping and supporting a project manager make good decisions as the project is being executed. Okay, that's the concept. And now I've used this for project probability, but I could use training data. I could go back and upload. I can use this for risks. I can have risk features, risk characteristics, which I do. I've defined, I think one of my researchers has defined 400 characteristics of a risk. And I could have a number of risks. Did they occur in the project or not? And then look at a new project. What are the characteristics? Is this risk going to occur? I could use this for quality. I could use this for stakeholder communication. As long as you can define the characteristics or the features of what you're trying to look at and provide enough historical data, labeled data, then you can use this tool. It's turned into a bit of a generic tool, and I'm finding a number of people are looking at it and trying to use it. What's the biggest issue you're going to ask me? No, you don't have to ask me. The biggest issue is the data, okay? Getting the data, getting the project data, getting the data labeled, organizing the data. We know that 70 to 80% of any machine learning tool is data wrangling, getting the data correct and getting it in place. And the other thing is I've worked with a person who created machine learning tools in his organization. And based on his input, as well as a number of other people, they've told me, Paul, you can look at parameters in your neural network. So I have 3 layers. Why not 4? Why not 5? Well, it makes it faster with 3 as opposed to having 100. And what about the number of iterations it runs? It runs based on for loops. So what about those iterations, whether I run 1,000 or 3,000? And his input is, Paul, those parameters don't really matter. They have a insignificant impact on the output compared to the data. Okay? So at this point, I'm going to pause. And if anyone has any questions, or James, if there are questions in the chat box that I can't see right now, if people want to ask me questions about this, I'm open to questions at this point.
I have a question. I'm curious why you didn't use linear regression. I know it's a generic tool, but linear regression, you would actually, with only like 100 features, you would probably get some significant results. You could also know what features actually mattered.
I'm sorry, with what are you asking now? Why I didn't just use regression?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, you can do data mining on this. Go ahead and do data mining, right? And use regression analysis and find your results that way. That's okay. You can do that.
I'm guessing the data is not just continuous data. It's categorical data as well, I guess, Paul.
Yes. Yeah.
So you wouldn't be able to use. You'd have to use something like logistic regression, because standard regression obviously wouldn't work.
Well, regression just tries to find features in the data. But I mean, are you regressing it against a label?
Well,
that would be difficult.
Yeah, it's just, I assumed it would have categorical information. So I knew that the regression, if you're trying to find line the best fit, you can't do that unless it's continuous. You've probably got some continuous data in there, but the regression probably wouldn't be sufficient, I wouldn't have thought. But sure. I'm not answering the question.
Good question. No, that's a good question. You know what? And if this is what I tell people who say they want to use the tool, and people have come to me and said, oh, can I use this? Can I play with it or whatever? And especially government organizations who say, oh, I've got lots of data. And the first step is take your data and do some data mining on it. Don't try and use this tool right away, because your data is probably a mess. You've got 2 data fields means the same thing, right? You've got 1 data field, or you've got 3 data fields that mean the same thing, and you don't want to overplay the significance by having 3 data fields that actually are mean the same thing. You have data fields that are useless. You don't mean anything. You don't need, and you have data that's corrupt in those data fields. So, another question? I'll take one more question, then I'll move on to my next one. No? Okay, I'll take questions at the end as well.
Brilliant.
Okay, let me just pull up and share this one and back to this one here. Open this guy here. And the whole concept behind the predictor tool, as I've said before, is I'm just trying to inspire people to find creative ways to make projects more successful. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, looks good to me, Paul.
Okay, good. Okay, so the whole point of this predictor tool, the whole point of this, as I said, I want to inspire people to think about projects in a different way. I want us to change the methodology so that we're more successful. Will this work on Agile? Why not? What data do you have in sprints? Of course you have data in sprints. Of course, if you're using user stories, I have to give a shout out to my friend Colin Hammond, who's on the call today. You've got to use Scope Master, right? It's such an easy to use tool. Why not? Why not find a better way to implement your Agile projects and make them more successful? All right, second part, let's go on. The second part is really, really exciting. So you have to pay attention to this one. So what I've been working on in this part is natural language processing. My areas of interest, I have three in terms of project management. One is machine learning, we just talked about. The second is natural language processing. The third one, which I'm not talking about today, is genetic algorithms. So virtual project assistant, smartphone, we've got a smartphone here. And with this, there's an utterance. The utterance is what you say, and the intent is really what you want. And what I've done is I've broken this down in my research into 3 levels. So level 1 is the basic retrieval of information. And of course, I've been told not to demo technology live. It never works doing it live. But I'll give it a try.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Oh no, I had this once and it, very first time I did it. Alexa, is there any training in the scope document? Alexa, is there any training in the scope document?
Yes, there is training. 5 people are identified for 1 week each of training. Would you like more detail?
Okay, so that's just, now I did that on one call and people were going in the background, hey, my Alexa just turned on. So that's a basic retrieval of information. You have project documents, they're in a data repository somewhere, and you're doing a simple query. There are organizations, this is just a demo, by the way, this doesn't really work. I'm just kind of doing this in the background kind of thing to show you the capability. There are organizations around the world that do this. I know of 2 in the United States that are doing it now. They don't do it for project management documentation. They're using it for things like large legal documents, as well as the organization's policies and procedures. And so it's this, level 1 is basic retrieval of information. With level 2, you need to understand project management concepts. And that's where it gets a little bit trickier. And a project management concept, you need to have a body of language. So for example, what is a critical path? If you're with PMI or have done any of the work through PMBOK, what's the critical path? Or what is earned value management? How do we interpret that? That's not something that Siri or Alexa will understand, because when I ask Siri something about a schedule, she talks to me about my appointments and my calendar. So it's a different language. And then, so let's see if we got, see what I can do here. Alexa, there are 3 tasks this week. Can I move them to next week?
I'm not sure.
Told you, now it doesn't always work. Alexa, there are 3 tasks this week. Can I move them to next week?
The tasks scheduled for this week are not on the critical path. However, one of the tasks has an identified risk based on the risk register. Should I contact the risk owner and ask her to contact you?
So this is what I call, we're getting to something called ubiquitous project management, where anywhere at any time, you'll be able to manage the project. And we get down even further here into level 3, which is where you also involve machine learning and expert systems. So you ask something like, how do I reduce my budget by 5% without changing the project end date? And that involves logic. So as project managers, we go through that logic. We say, okay, can I stop working overtime? Is there any money in contingency? Is this risk no longer relevant? Can I save money from there? And I have a number of, and then what you do is add machine learning on the back end to say, what is the best solution based on historical information? But one of my principles is called integrated approach. And you heard it a bit on the demo that Alexa just said. And that is, you don't want to do one thing at the cost of something else. In other words, I don't want to reduce my budget by 5% and then the project end date is fine. Okay, everything's good. No, no, no. You have to figure out if that's going to increase your risk or reduce your quality or do something else. You have to think about every aspect of the project. And this is one of the problems as we see machine learning and AI tools come into project management. There are tools out there now, and I won't mention any names, Jira, but what they're doing is they're doing predictive analytics. And what that means is they'll look at people working on tasks, and they'll have somebody working on a task and they'll say, okay, this person is not very efficient on the task. You should replace them with somebody else. Otherwise, you're going to miss the project end date. And the problem I have with that is, well, what about risk? What about quality? You know, what about these other factors in the project? Maybe as a project manager, I deliberately put that person on the task because it's a way to minimize the risks in the project. And yet you have these scheduling tools come in for project management that say, oh yes, I'm doing predictive analytics and here's what you should do. Your end date's in jeopardy or this is in jeopardy. We have to have an integrated approach to make sure that all aspects of the project are considered and not just piecemeal it like this, okay? So 3 levels and the importance of data. So what I call this is a virtual assistant with an intelligent agent attached to it. And the intelligent agent is the one that has the kind of expert system and knows the project management logic and knows how to understand and make better decisions or help a project manager make better decisions as the project is being executed. And what kind of data do we need here? Just an example. Of course, we need project documents, project status updates. You need to know the project conditions, external environment, historical results, and a corpus, which is a body of work of project language to make sure you know what the terminology means. Okay. Takeaways, really what I'm encouraging people is to disrupt the project methodology to increase project success. We can't keep doing it this way. We really can't. The only change that we've made in the last, I don't know how many years in project management is that we introduced Agile. And you know what I call Agile? I don't mean to offend anybody. Agile is just a faster way to fail. Really, that's what they've done. Agile is a faster way to get to project failure. And I talked to an Agile project manager and he said, Paul, you know what? You're right. Because with Agile, we go check with the customer. Customer says, no, no, that's not what we want. So we go back and we redo it. So the sooner we know that we're not doing it right, the better off we are. But nothing has really changed in project management. And I believe that AI is an opportunity to change the way that we do project management. I also think that this technology really has unlimited potential. The work that I'm looking at now, this research on this, the development of this is 10 years old. We're seeing technology that's not recent. It's 10 years old and we're starting to find a way to apply it right now. And that's what I'm trying to do. Every development that comes out, I say, how can I apply this to project management to make things work better, increase project success. And of course, as always, data is critical. We talked about the data being critical because without data, it doesn't work. I have 2 books. Hopefully somebody's found a link and posted them. Applying Artificial Intelligence to Project Management. And then that's kind of the basics. And then the PMO one is a bit of a higher level and I go into more depth and more detail. Available on Kindle ebook or in paperback. As I said, I really appreciate anybody who purchases it because that's how I fund my research. Can I tell a little secret here? I don't want to offend anybody, but I'll tell you a story. So I went to PMI. I talked to the vice president in PMI and I told him the work I'm doing. I said, Paul, that's fantastic. You need to apply for a research grant from PMI. So I applied for a research grant from PMI and I was rejected. You know why I was rejected? Because apparently my work is not academic enough. They said there's no academic models about project management and AI that I could build on to make it better. In other words, it's too practical. So anyway, That's it. This is me. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn or after this is over if you've got my email address. Happy to talk to people. Happy to, do any one-on-one sessions or answer any questions and let you know where my work is going. Okay. That's about it. How did I do?
Oh, that was great. Thank you, Paul. Really, really interesting. Just before we jump into questions, would I be able to take back control? Because I'm going to use Menti for the questions that come in. So,
sure. Yeah, there's a lot of comments in the chat session, but I haven't really followed.
Yeah, there is loads in there, but I have been having a look. I couldn't really identify any. I don't think so many questions have come through.
All right.
But just before we jump into that, so how would you describe today's meetup, today's session to your colleagues? So we've only had 6 people reply. So if you want to ask questions, then we're going to see how we get on using the Menti. So an amazing topic to become part of the future workforce. Again, amazing topic, very interesting, really interesting and insightful, interesting and useful, plenty of scope for AI to help projects. Great insight, a peek into the future, great topics, and provided a starting point to develop new ways to deliver. It'd be really interesting, Paul, to see the data that was, the format of the data that was loaded into that neural network. I'd be interested to see that if you could show us.
Sure. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. So you could see it on, when I showed you how I loaded the data with the features across the top.
Okay, yeah.
And listen, if anybody wants the Excel spreadsheet or anybody wants my 87 features, just connect with me and I'll give it to you.
Oh, that's very
okay,
cool.
I didn't say this. I'm not a vendor. I'm not here selling things. Well, I did talk about the books. I apologize. I'm Canadian. That's what we do. We apologize.
The books are an exception. We can cope with that.
Yeah. So I'm just doing research in this. And if you want to play with the tool, let me know. I'll set up an authorized account for you. If you want to know the 87 factors, I can send you a Word document with that. If you want to see the Excel spreadsheet, I can send you. With the Excel spreadsheet, I do have to clean it up for the projects though, because I don't really have approval from all those project people to send it.
Yeah, sure. I did wonder.
But outside of that, I can send you that stuff. So if you need anything like that, sure.
Thank you. So what topics would you like to cover in the future meetups? Just before I jump onto questions, Paul. So we've got
sure.
So some topics: big data, new products, how to measure earned benefit using artificial intelligence. Lots of good suggestions. Running a practical session for Python at the beginning. You mentioned the creation of a bot. Yeah, that's our web scraping bot. Sure, how to manage benefits and return on investment, human factors affected by artificial intelligence in the project environment. So lots and lots of good suggestions, and please keep them coming in because we'll review them all. And you've got a chance to pivot the direction of the potential future talks. So hopefully, I don't really understand how this works, but questions should appear here. So you've got a question on screen here, Paul. How did you determine success?
Oh, good question. I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier. So the success can be user defined. Okay, you can define it yourself. For my purposes, I define it as deliver the project scope within 5% of the budget and 5% of the schedule time. So in other words, the project didn't go more than 5% over budget, and the project wasn't more than 5% late to whatever the schedule was. That's how I defined it for my model, but that is completely user defined. You can define it however you want to define it.
Okay, so you build, you do some feature engineering, and you say that this was, you classify it as, say, successful or unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes, certainly, because we have, and this is the other thing that's hard to get data on projects is we have here in Ottawa, we've just put in a light rail transit system, and it's 2 years late. But if you go ask the city, was the project successful? They'd say, oh yes, yeah, it's successful. Look, people are traveling on it. So it's very difficult sometimes to get the customers or sponsors to give you an honest answer. So we have to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good question.
Next question. I guess. So,
what are your top 3 features of the 87? There aren't any top 3. They're all weighted equally.
But surely some of them, if you do if you do, what's it called? Mine's gone completely blank.
If you do
reverse,
some analytics on it,
yeah, you reverse engineer and you see which features are providing the most insight or correlation. Is that something you haven't done yet?
as I said, with 87 features, it would be possible. But if I had 200,000 features, there's no way you'd be able to. And that's really what the machine learning tool is. It should be 200,000 features in there. And if I had 200,000 features, it would be kind of difficult to go through. I'd be using a different tool. I wouldn't be using neural network.
Yeah.
The tools to do those analytics kinds of things, they are becoming available. I just don't use them yet.
Sure. No, I think that would be sort of reverse engineering what you've done would be really interesting to see which features. I imagine things like
but that doesn't
over budget and over schedule.
Yeah, but that's not really important, you know. Why would you want to know that? It doesn't necessarily matter, because here's what the label tells you whether the project was successful or not. And you can have an organization, and this is where I don't want to get on a rant, but this is where the models that we have in things like PMBOK and the models that are being produced by academics are useless. They're becoming obsolete. And the reason is because the data determines what you need. We can have an organization, and that organization can have 100 successful projects without doing a risk plan. If that's the way things are successful in that organization, then why are you wasting your time doing a risk plan? So whatever the correlation is in neural network, it's whatever makes things successful in that organization. And it may be you don't need to do certain things that PMI says, oh, you need to do this. Or it may be that, you know, maybe communication isn't as important as you think it is. If you can deliver project success, it's kind of like lean project management. Just put in what you need for your organization to be successful. You don't really need everything. And the way we've got with the academic models is, oh, you need everything. You need stakeholder analysis. You need communication plans. You need resource. Okay, I'm okay. That's a good start. But what is it that makes everyone successful?
Sure.
What is it that makes a project successful?
Sure. Great answer. Thank you. Can you use OCM as a factor? In other words, change management?
I wouldn't see why not, right? This is, can we digitize it? So change management how successful am I with change management in my organization? One of the factors in the project executing stage is how many change orders have I had? I didn't get into natural language processing side of sentiment analysis. One of the other things that I'm doing is, it's just because it's very common, but I have a Python program that can pull out of anything like text analysis, text messages, emails, and you can pull out what people's sentiment is. So how is this project going? Is it going well? Do you feel good about it, or do you not feel good about it? And that can be key for change management. But there are tools that are doing that already. Tools like Slack, sure. Microsoft Teams, all that stuff. So you can pull it out as a trend. I would say pick trends in the project. You know, what's the project team member's sentiment, and give it a value. Is it increasing or decreasing? Okay, there's a way you can use change management in this tool. The other thing we didn't talk about is project manager experience. Okay, I don't have that as a factor, but maybe it's a good factor to consider. How many projects has this project manager done? 5, 10, 15? Is the project manager certified? But in terms of your question of change management, anything that you can capture as a piece of data, as a feature, as a characteristic of change management, then you can digitize it.
Sure. Thank you, Paul. Next question. Do you think, I guess, the industry will adopt this idea of artificial intelligence to project management in the next 5 years?
It's here now, so we've got it now, and some.
But will it? I guess the industry hasn't adopted it, I would say, as a whole.
Well, some have. So there's tools like EpicFlow out there, and there's a British organization that's purchased licenses for it. There is Shark Tower. I don't know if any of the Shark Tower people are on, if you've heard of Shark Tower. They use AI. and you know, they're starting to get customers. There's David Porter in Australia, who you're going to have a meetup with. I think it's in, you say, June or July. He'll probably talk about his customers.
July, yeah.
He's using AI on financial management. So some of it is here. There's a reluctance to get involved with it, and I think the main reluctance is this uncertainty about what it can do for me, and lack of awareness. And somebody really needs to go in, and I think if the change manager needs to go in and say, listen, if you want to adopt AI in the industry, and everybody says, yes, I want to do it, you need to go through a process. And the process is, what is it you want to fix? I want higher success rate in my projects. What's the objective? And then once you've got that objective, say, okay, do I have the data? Because you can implement AI tools and you don't have any data. It's not going to work. So we really need somebody to go in there and say, okay, you've got the data. Now let's look at the tools that are either available in the industry, and some people just do customized tool. I'm talking to a person from Ericsson, and his employees come in all the time and say, I want a prediction on how many of this whatever I can sell in Latin America, because I have to determine which features to add to this product in the next 3 months. And he runs a machine learning tool based on data, based on characteristics of the environment, based on characteristics of purchases that people have made, based on characteristics of the country. So it's being done now. I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see, yes, a bit of a massive shift, because I don't think project success rates are sustainable. I just think that all the money we're putting into these projects, especially large projects, you know, it's not really sustainable. And, you know, there are, in terms of project management, industry-wide, well, we see AI in industry all over the place, right? Google, Amazon, Facebook. I mean, they're capturing everything, every click you make, and try and profile you and then sell you whatever they think you'll like based on your personality. So it's in industry, but in terms of project management, yeah, it could be a ways off, but you got to be careful of vendors. You got to make sure you get the right vendor, and watch out for this piecemeal approach. If you're going to do something like a scope master on a user story, that's okay, because you're fixing that scope statement. But if you're doing an entire project, risk, quality, schedule, cost, you have to have a total solution. Sorry, I got a rant then. Thank you.
No problem at all. Next question. How do you feel like an organization's culture is factored into the model?
That's a good question. And that is one of the characteristics. Okay, that's one of the, we talk about the project environment. So when I talk about the features, one of the features is, what is the culture of this organization? Is it, you know, and is it, you know, do we use agile? Do we use waterfall? Do we use hybrid? Is the organization, what do you call it? Government organizations are risk averse. Entrepreneurial organizations are risk takers. So all those factors can be put into one of the features to say, you know, based on this project that I want to do, then run that. Is it a significant characteristic? I don't know. We can let the neural network sort that out.
Cool. Yeah, no, very interesting. So we got lots and lots of questions building up here. We probably won't get through them all, but you okay just to answer a few more, Paul?
Oh, absolutely. I'll try and answer them as fast as I can. How do you determine how many hidden layers require the neural network? Excellent question. I think the maximum right now, the last I looked, was around 1,800, or is getting to 2,000. Those are for the huge academic researchers who are doing things in the field of medicine and things like that, where it's really critical. I mean, if you want to look at an X-ray for a child and determine if they have pneumonia or not, or if you want to determine it from an MRI brain scan, those need to have many more layers. For business purposes, not so many. So I had a presentation from a university professor outside of Ottawa, and he said in his work on it with businesses, you don't need to have that much. You don't need to have as many projects. You don't need to have that many features, because the business environment is not as what's the word I'm looking for? Not as, you know, intense as something like a medical issue.
And also sorry, Paul.
Yep. So for me, I picked three. So I picked three because the more neural networks you use, the more computer power you're going to cost you, and also the more CPU and the longer it's going to take. And as I said before, the number of layers is not really a huge factor. It's the data. The input data, is it a logical link across the features? No.
That's what I was going to say. If you've got effort left over, you're probably better off spending it on your cleansing and
spend it on the data. Spend it on the data
and not
analysis.
on just spending money on computation.
Yeah, it's easy to add a layer. I could add a layer. It's pretty easy, but
just sure.
What do you think about applying unsupervised learning for better project management? We're not there yet with unsupervised learning. So here's what's happening unsupervised learning. It's falling behind in terms of the research in the world. The neural network type of machine learning has really, really advanced, and we see it, and we can see things like self-driving cars, and we see everything that Google does and Amazon and Facebook. But for project management, what you would have to do for unsupervised learning, it's almost, you combine it with reinforcement learning. And what you do is you take a project, and as you move through the project, every decision that's made, you have to kind of let the tool understand what you've just done. You know, in this situation, I made this decision. In this situation, I made this decision. So it starts to learn. It's like learning to ride a bicycle to a certain extent. It's very difficult. It's much better with labels. And one of the problems that people are going to have when they execute projects is right now a project manager makes all sorts of decisions as the project is being executed, but we don't capture that. We don't capture the results of those decisions. So someone comes up and says, oh my goodness, this has happened. What do we do? Project manager says, oh, do this. But do you ever find out the result? Is that documented anywhere? I don't think so. So.
That's great. Good answer. Thank you, Paul. Can we write bots for freedom of information requests to extract the needed data from government projects? It seems let's see.
Little bit beyond me, although I am working on developing the natural language processing bot in Rasa, which is an open source tool used in Python.
I can answer that one for you if you want.
Yeah, it's not really, freedom of information to the government is not my area of expertise. My wife actually used to do that, not write the programs, but she used to actually provide that information as one of her roles. But no,
I would have thought that's more than possible to do with the current level of automation we have. Whether we should be inundating the government with thousands of FOI requests, I guess, is another topic of discussion. But I think
that's more of a political issue too. What information do they want to release?
Yeah.
Which do they have to empty out?
Have you analyzed the application of AI during
Have you analyzed
execution to predict the outcome?
No, it's one of the areas I'm working on right now. Okay. It's very difficult because, as I've said, there's a lot of decisions that are taken in the process, and as those decisions are taken, they're not documented. So part of this whole process, so what I'm doing is I have to get some synthetic data. Synthetic data, anybody familiar with that? It's the way of saying make it up. So I'm trying to work through that process and use synthetic data to prove in a model that if the organization captured that data, then they would be able to use the tool successfully.
Sure. Have you got time, Paul, just to answer one more question before?
Yeah, sure. Listen, I'm okay. It's up to you guys.
Yeah. Okay. So from your findings, what do projects need to do, or maybe in a case or not to do, to be successful?
Capture data. Capture structured data in a format that machine learning tools can use it. It's not just even machine learning tools. Listen, if we capture the data in proper format and we capture the correct data for project management, start off by doing predictive analytics, start off by doing data mining. But right now, we've got a lot of data, but it's not necessarily the right data. And we're not really using any tools to analyze it properly. People are still in the old traditional sense of, here's my lessons learned document, and here's my you know, here's my project documentation. And they, you know, it takes some, you know, incentive to change. And the
Yeah,
incentive
sure.
should be that we need to be successful. Oh, I do have one more rant before, if you got another question, we do have one more rant. People ask me this question all the time. Will AI replace the project manager? And I have to tell you, this comes out, if anybody's seen this, it's one of my pet peeves, okay? PricewaterhouseCoopers put out this report. It was out of PricewaterhouseCoopers in India, I believe. And it said that 80% of a project manager's tasks by the year 2030 will be replaced, right? Really? What's getting automated, right? What's getting automated? What I see being automated is creating a project status report, organizing a meeting schedule. Is that what project managers, do we have project managers that are spending 80% of their time doing stuff like that? Like if you're hiring, if you've got project managers spending 80% of your time doing that stuff, don't get a project manager, like hire one of my students, like they'll do it for you, right? What project managers need to be doing is the critical stuff, making decisions, looking at the data, right? Understanding what the data means and applying that to project success. And that will not go away. That will not get automated. Even if it does get automated, and the tools that I've talked about, the machine learning tools that I've talked about, there needs to be a collaboration. And the example that I use is, I'll go back to the MRI scans that was developed at the University of California. And they took MRI brain scans and they showed a radiologist. And so what that is either the person is fine and they'll treat the ailment with medication, or a surgeon needs to open the person's skull. So very serious determination of what the decision is here. And a radiologist gets this correct about 90 to 93% of the time. Very difficult to look at the scan and see what it is. They've used machine learning tools where they've taken hundreds of thousands of scans, even maybe up to 1 million scans from all the hospitals across North America. And they're labeled as this one was benign and this one was critical. And the machine learning tool was accurate 95% of the time. But you know what they did? They took the radiologist and the machine learning tool and they combined them and got them to collaborate. And when they collaborated, the success rate, the accuracy rate increased to 98%. Okay, so better than the radiologist by themselves, better than the machine learning tool by themselves. So that's a lesson for project managers. If we want to really get the project success rate up there much, much higher, it's not about replacing project management tasks. It's about collaborating with AI tools for a better result. Okay, that's another rant. Any more questions?
I've heard that that hybrid system between the sort of the human and the model is outperforms anything as well.
Of course, and even in this initial stages, it's the data. Project management role will change. The project manager will be more responsible for data and capturing data and verifying data, but it'll still be a role. Okay.
Sure.
Anything else?
I can't imagine project success rates have been good for the last few years. Why haven't the PMI or APM changed their methodology or introduced something new?
Why didn't they fund me? I talked to the project, and you know what he said? He says, yes, we have to, and I'm sorry if there's academics from PMI in the call. You know, he said, we have, you know, there are academic people who are with PMI, and that's one of the sections where we have to, you know, make sure that they still have their input into, you know, how we organize things. And the next PMBOK that comes out is going to be more like Prince 2. It's going to be general theories as opposed to detailed methodology. You know what? I don't think they really understand the technology.
Yeah.
And listen, anything new, people have this fear, right? And that's
Absolutely.
why when I do my talks, you know, will AI take over the world? There's other issues with AI, okay? If read the book called Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom, or read the other one called Weapons of Math Destruction by Kathy. So there are fears, there are issues with AI tools, but not with AI and project management. There's no fears there as long as you know how to manage them properly. So.
Sure. Okay, I think on that bombshell, Paul, we should draw some of the questions.